Hello, my name's J.R. Logan, and I'm a volunteer with the Mill River Trail Project. I wanted to put together some slides to share some of what's happened over the past year and also some of what I hope will happen or some of the possibilities for the trail. So this should take about 15 minutes. This slide here just shows you the area that I've been primarily working in, which is the area in New Haven on the Mill River, really trying to get this foot trail established between East Rock Park and the Criscolo Park down at the bottom. Now there's lots of different parcels here and it has an industrial history. And so it's a game of really putting piece by piece by piece together, making sure we have connections and figuring out how to do so. There's a great plan that was developed by the city and Reed Hildebrand that talk about that. And so how are we doing on that plan? You can go and look at millrivertrail.com and read about to get this interactive map. You see some color coding here showing where there is green or blue, which is essentially where there is a trail, blue being kind of the not ideal, but workable, and green being where the actual trail has been fully developed. And you can get from Criscolo up there. You see some orange where there's something in development moving forward. And then there's some black lines that are more on the aspirational idea phase. Just to show you what it looks like when the trail's finished, this is a beautiful piece that was done along the trail by Industrial Flow Systems, which is off of John Murphy Drive. They move the fence to allow this to happen. This is done by the city or coordinated by the city and supported by the DEEP through their trail grants. This continues along to another section that we've been working on with URI and doing some plantings for some time. So you can visit this by going to John Murphy Drive and going down the access point or to Grand Avenue, where there's now a new fence. You can see this is at Grand Paint, the beginning of the section of the trail that we've already done. And there's this nice pedestrian gate that was added this year. Another section that has been of great interest is right off of Humphrey Street after you go through the underpass that is the railway underpass. There's a section which runs parallel to that, and that section has been opened and is now on a very rudimentary level available for scouting, so you can get through and get all the way down to the river from Humphrey Street. However, we are still working through we know it's not Amtrak land, and we know it's not the abutters land, and we are ascertaining the exact the rights to that land so that we can do a more formal construction project. And this is a really important connection for the trail. Otherwise, you have to go all the way around a set of buildings. And so we're working to get this nailed down. You can see the overhead view of what's envisioned. The Humphrey Street, you're basically doing a switchback because the Mill River goes underneath the Amtrak railway, and there's just not enough room to get a trail, even with floats or other things. Because of tides, you can't get something that goes right along the trail. And so the best route that we've been able to figure out is to go under the Amtrak bridge and then switch back along this, what was once a private railway. And you can actually see the railway ties in the ground that have been covered up, but has long since been abandoned. You can see here some folks have worked on some scouting to make sure that we were able to get through that, and just clearing the what was completely overgrown brush. And I can confirm that it will actually be a nice, pleasant trip through a wooded area connecting us back to the river. Here we are showing the space that we hope to be able to turn into that trail with some folks from Rosa DeLauro's office, as well as Mike Harris from the New Haven Innovation Collaborative, which has been supportive. Both groups have been very supportive in this project overall, and recognize the value in having a trail through our urban landscape. Because we have to go underneath that railway underpass, we've really been thinking about how to improve it. It's notable for being dark and gloomy and being covered in graffiti. And so I was working with someone from Acuity, Ryan, and he has been helping us, as well as really amazing donations from the community, support from the uh, Sustainability Fund and the New Haven Innovation Collaborative, and so many others, in order to get this lighting put in there, which we eventually hope to, using the LoRaWAN network through Helium, which is basically a long-range wireless network that a bunch of volunteers are working on. We want to be able to have interactivity, so you can use an app and get it to change. Right now, it is on various different programmed sequences, and so you can see what it looks like. The hope was to really make it just more inviting to pedestrians, to give a sense that there is someone taking care of it, and it's artistic, so to inspire, and also as a gateway between Fairhaven and East Rock, really right in the heart of the Mill River District, to create something that was a gateway and entertaining. So there is this area has always attracted a lot of graffiti, so much so that there's not an ability to I don't know how to limit it. We're not going to make it pristine. So just looking at other examples, this is a Krog Street tunnel in Atlanta. Structurally, it's very similar to what the underpass is in the Mill River. And it has become somewhat of a tourist attraction because it's an open or a free graffiti wall there. And folks have put a lot of signs and art and continue to paint over it. Now, I don't know if that's something that we would endorse here, but it's something to think about. Is rather than trying to keep it pristine, do we go the other way and try and fill it with art and drawing and encourage people in that limited space? And could we keep them to a limited space to make that tunnel more interesting and in a different way cared for and attended to? So the other part that I'm excited about for the Mill River is by the Ralph Walker skating rink, really led by the New Haven City Engineering Department, is a section which is going to be completed. This is really one of the last sections to make it a continuous part up into East Rock from Criscolo. Currently, this is DOT land and blocked off. There's notably a tidal gate here that you see depicted. But folks cross that and go fishing from it all the time. They have done the plans, and to my understanding, the construction should start in the spring, or hopefully will start in the spring, and it will go underneath the off ramps and DOT land, bringing us right to where District is. There's also work being done by the Connecticut Fund for the Environment, now Save the Sound, and Exchange Street, which is between Grand Avenue and Chapel Street. We'll have a bunch of greenery done, added to it to make it a more pleasant space and to actually help with stormwater runoff and limit it. It's right by the salt piles, and so I expect that will be really helpful, that there's not more water running right by salt piles into the water, although that water is brackish, so I'm not sure about all the impacts. This is just a view above Criscolo Park, and as I'm sort of thinking forward as to what I imagine and would hope could happen, and I think like a trail, we've been focusing on really linking it together in this small area as we go through the most industrial urban portion between East Rock and Criscolo. But there's so many possibilities beyond that. We can continue this trail ideally over connecting to the trails at Long Wharf, so that our whole waterway is connected and people can experience that. Now, how would we do that? As you can see, there's the Chapel Street Bridge, which is interesting, and a drawbridge itself. And then you get to the Suzio properties where they do cement work. I'm interested in whether that strip of land that is a green treed area along the edge could be used to access towards Long Wharf. The trick is that there is a lot of train and other infrastructure just beyond that property. And so there would be some logistical work to be able to figure out how we cross that. Then once you get to the Maritime Center that you see beyond the oil tanks, there is a nice existing trail which would continue. So that linkage would be great. I canoed out and was able to get some scouting pictures this summer of the property that is running along the Suzio property. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of land here, and it seems very appropriate and actually quite pleasant with the vistas for hosting a trail. Here's an overhead view showing where you'd go. You'd come across the Chapel Street Bridge and then turn and walk along through this park-like area abutting the Suzio property. Here is a depiction and showing that really once you're across Suzio property, you'd have to figure out how you get to East Street and to the rest of it. In the long run, perhaps there'll be some change about how the oil and so on that's there by Forbes Avenue is configured. But in the near term, it would really be figuring out how you get through the railway that separates that area from the shoreline. And on the other side, I think that there's a lot of possibility, maybe even less complex because there's less infrastructure to consider. But along the Quinnipiac River, it's very natural that the Quinnipiac and the mill meet at Criscolo Park. And so going from Criscolo Park and traveling up the Quinnipiac along the shoreline. Now this is former big industrial properties, and most of it right now is kind of brownfields or open fields with brick buildings. You can see from the satellite shot that there's large parcels. There's a few continuing industrial uses, various things often serving maritime, either delivery or maritime repair, those sorts of things. This is from a scouting mission along it. The sunset pictures from the Grand Avenue Bridge, and you see just the kind of parking lot right up to the edge, but really a beautiful section of river, which in my mind has great possibility for whether it's breweries or a trail with some outdoor dining, but where we have struggled to have enough land along Long Wharf to make it feel like a full shoreline community with all of the supporting infrastructure and the experience that you would expect for a shoreline city. This area has a lot of property, and so in my mind we have a second opportunity to have a beautiful shoreline experience, which mixes its history of industrial uses, but also has access points and has facilities that support the enjoyment and use of that waterfront. And then there's just a couple of vistas. You can see there's various rusting past industrial dendritis in the area, but also amazing views of the bridge and other things. Now the city has been thinking about this. Now this is a 2002 plan. You can see that they have a path outlined all the way along the shorefront. This is called the River Street Development Plan. And they have a connection under Ferry Street, I believe, to the existing trail that runs along the Quinnipiac and up. I think this, if done well with the right businesses and the right infrastructure, this could be absolutely fantastic and actually transformative to our own view of the city. And I really hope we can figure out as a Mill River how to support this sort of initiative and this sort of initiative with the right sort of pedestrian river access so that we can all enjoy it and benefit from it. And then there's opportunities moving forward. We've been in touch with Hampden and talked to Mark, their lead engineer there, who has been working with the Regional Water Authority to understand where we can continue the path forward through Hampden and actually ultimately connect it to the Farmington Canal Trail. Again, the trail becomes more valuable as we connect it to a network, and folks more folks can access it, use it for transportation, enjoyment, and just general usage. There's a few segments that I am interested in, and we haven't quite figured out what to do with yet on the interior of the section we've been focusing on. Here we have, this is near where the Save the Sound or Connecticut Fund for the Environment is working on Exchange Street. And the gate for the Grand Avenue that we've worked on comes down to Grand Avenue. What you actually do is you kind of dogleg up here where Reclamation Lumber is, and then you go down the Haven Street and to Exchange Street, and you can cut through the park here and get to continue down to Criscola Park. These salt piles, as I understand, they do bring them in by boat, so they have a need to access the water there. But certainly there's a large strip of land, and it begs a question to me: is there a way that we can be closer to the water for a greater portion of this trail? And are there ways that we can accommodate the industrial use while also still getting pedestrian access? Further down, it gets to some areas where there's actually some old docks and some oystering work. And I think it's nice to be able to have people walk along and then see that work happen and recognize that it's still an industrial used river. This is just from some canoe-based scouting showing the green strip that runs along where the salt pile is, and showing that it is pretty wide and likely could accommodate some sort of trail that may occasionally have to be diverted or shut down as they're loading or unloading the materials they're bringing in, but has great possibility as far as continuing a greater portion along. We've worked also with various volunteer groups, including from the architecture school. Some of them have really advocated and thought about different ideas we can do. So this is one for examples of art along the trail to attract more people. And they've identified various points where that might work, and that might work using the infrastructure that's there. Just like we worked on lighting up the underpass, there could be using existing fencing and making it more interesting, giving that sense of ownership and care for the spaces. As you look along the shoreline, now these are just photos of what the existing shore looks like. There's interesting examples of, there used to be a dock that would run all the way along here. You can see the pilings, but there's a lot of erosion happening. And so we have to think about how we do plantings, how we stay aware of the shore to protect the trail, protect the shore, and potentially extend out the useful habitat by being thoughtful about what grasses and other areas are encouraged, so that we are providing the best environment for the natural assets that we want to see in the area. I showed that a lot of my experience was by canoe on the Mill River. That's how I found it, because there wasn't much of a trail prior to these efforts. And it really is, it's industrial, but it's really interesting, and it's beautiful to connect and get the incredible variety as you go up into the northern part of the Mill River, and then experience the more industrial southern part, and then eventually get out to the harbor. I would love to see an official urban water trail that goes the entire length. And what that means is start thinking about where we can put canoe launches and what other supporting infrastructure we can put, such as a portage around the tidal gate. This is, again, some students from the architecture school who worked on scouting and doing some preliminary evaluation of what might be possible and what locations might work well. One that I'd like to see happen soon, and I understand was part of an initial plan, but got delayed because of funding and environmental concerns with the capping and remediation work that was being done as the district was developed. So near the district, at the roundabout that abuts the Mill River, there's a section that kind of slopes into the water. I've taken some pictures here. I've used it as a canoe launch. because it's got the roundabout, which is convenient for some, as a meetup place and for parking. And the slope is a gradient that allows you to walk a boat down there, both at high and low tide. So this is workable for the adventurous right now, but I wonder what options there are available to be able to make this an official place where folks can launch a canoe, and would do that with minimal impact without changing or impacting the soils and the environment in any way that would be problematic. So that's something I'm investigating and looking for what sort of approaches are available, also what sort of knowledge exists in the community and with the engineers and folks who have worked with district. The spot where the slope goes down appears to be in DOT land. So it would also be working with those partners to figure out what we could do with the canoe launch off of the trail. Then we get to the tidal gate. This is right behind the Ralph Walker rink. You can see the canoe. There's a place that you can pull off, and many people have portaged around the tidal gate. Obviously, the tidal gate provides a barrier. It provides a barrier to fish as well, although its presence has regulated the northern water to some degree against tide, but mostly has stopped saltwater from inundating, and the environment has developed around that and created a unique area. So the tide gate provides an interesting story we can talk about, and it provides a place where we should think about how you can safely put signage and a ramp so that people can portage around it and have a continuous experience on the river. From that same group of students, there's just some drawings here showing what we might do. Essentially ramps spaced back from the tidal gate, potentially some buoys as you are to signify where you shouldn't go past in order to avoid getting caught up in the tidal gate for canoeists. This is just a photo showing some friends enjoying the canoeing space just past where the district launch was. And, a reminder that it is attractive, and we want our spaces like the district. You want to be able to see people canoeing and running and enjoying the environment around it. So it's about creating an experience. And this is a project I'm starting to work on, kind of a pilot of, can we create a canoe? If we get these launches started, can we put boats there with a subscription set up and an app where you select in the app to unlock a boat, and once you've signed the waiver, taken the course, and paid whatever the membership fee is to cover the costs, you can then self-serve rent canoes and access our river and enjoy it. So the goal here would really be lower the barrier to accessing the river and getting more people to experience both from the shore and from the water side. And so that's I've got some prototypes going, and I hope to have an example of such a system put together by the summer. Thinking about the full trail in total is just, how do we get people to see it? And one thing is to inventory our assets. What are cultural assets along there? What are the points of interest that people can see? On the millrivertrail.com site, I have put together a map where I identified the things that I thought were most interesting and noteworthy. My hope would be that folks would start at one end or the other, and would have this map in phone or hand, printed or digitally, and go through and visit all of these various points of interest, really learning some of the assets of the city. Beyond that, I think that there's an opportunity to explore the industrial history. And so have started a project. I've been talking with a donor who's interested in supporting this. And I think that there's some other funds that might be able to match that. And I've talked to Colin Kaplan, a historian who's interested in helping with the project and really bringing to light some of the cultural and industrial history that's happened along this river. And it's a river that is named the Mill River because it had a mill on it, and because people were attracted to it and have used it. Um, for the building of Long Wharf was often done using the Mill River as a way to transport stone. And there's lots of other factories, and the Eli Whitney Museum was along it. So my view would be to create signs similar to this in kind of scale and scope. This is the Urban Oasis sign, which is where we did with URI, we created a little urban oasis near industrial flow systems just behind the Grand Avenue paint. And what that means is we had funding for plantings, interns that helped us, and volunteers worked on continually improving and making that a better place visually, but also as a habitat, as a waypoint for different animals to stop as they walk down that Mill River corridor. And on that sign, I'd put things like this story. This is John Holland. He's the guy in the little submarine, and he was a very early submarine inventor. He was out of New Jersey, and he created these very early prototypes for the US military. But before he got those contracts, he was searching for anyone who would fund his idea of having a practical submarine. And he got the Irish at the time were fighting the British, and there was a strong contingent of New England Irish who wanted to see them have an advantage. So they funded him, and a project that was dubbed the Finian Ram, although I think it was called the John Holland II officially. And he started construction of this prototype underwater submarine. He actually had two he was working on at the time. Well, unfortunately, he found there's several issues and kept wanting to perfect the device, the prototype he was building, and went over budget and over the patience of his funders. And many of those funders were apparently from New Haven, because they decided to go and claim the property as they saw fit, and forged John Holland's signature, snuck into his labs in New Jersey, and towed away two of the prototype submarines. One of them mistakenly sunk in the Sound on their way to New Haven. The second, they were able to get all the way to New Haven. This is the Ram. They went into the harbor and tried to figure out how to drive this thing around, to submerge it, to move it around. But everyone, of course, being unfamiliar with the operations of a submarine, were all over the place. And the harbor master of New Haven banished them from being in the harbor, declaring them a hazard to all navigation. Having nowhere to go with this and not knowing what to do, they snuck it up the Mill River, and near just across the river from where District is, they put it in a woodshed of one of the members. And there it sat for more than 40 years before it was discovered again. And it was brought down to a fair in Madison Square Garden to be displayed, and then brought to a museum in New Jersey where it now rests. But a little piece of early navigation or a nautical history, and the involvement of the war and the Irish and all sorts of things involved with New Haven. Just more interesting history. This is a picture that Colin Kaplan allowed me to use, and I hope we will use as part of the signage, showing we are along Ball Island, which right now is where that big industrial power plant is. We're looking back towards East Rock Park, which you can see in the background. And you can see there's lots of people oystering. They have their bases there. They have their boats going out to work in the harbor. And the Ball Island itself is right beside, that's where you see the grass on the right, has had a lot of uses. It was used for grazing cattle. At one point would eat the salt hay, and they would not, sheep, I believe, as well. They couldn't leave the islands. That's what made it useful as an island. Then it was a lumber yard. You see there's the Sanborn map on the side here. This is there's a whole set of maps of all of New Haven known as the Sanborns. They were maps that were used for insurance purposes. And so they were careful to identify all of the buildings and activities that were happening so that they could assess value. And you see the structure of the island in one of the histories as a lumberyard, predating the expansion of the English Station, which English Station has its own history and environmental legacy that has been left and is an interesting story in itself. This one surprised me. So I was looking through the Sanborns and saw this funny shape in the Mill River that was labeled Bathhouse, a square with an open center at the end of Beach Street. Beach Street no longer exists except for a small segment that comes off of State Street. But you can kind of draw the lines on the Sanborn and figure out that actually this bathhouse would have been very near where the Frenian Ram was stored, near where the highway goes over the Mill River, across from the district. And this is not, a depiction of our exact bathhouse, but this is a bathhouse in New York, which appears to have a very similar structure, and gives you an idea of what might have been right here on the Mill River. You've got to remember that bathhouses had a practical purpose. In fact, I was looking back into the aldermanic meeting notes and the articles, and there was a committee on the bathhouses. There were debates about whether they could continue to just use the raw river or they should have a tub that would allow them underneath it, that would allow them to keep the water in it even when the tide was low and extend the times that the bathhouse could be used. There were elections and politics around who was hired to manage and care for these bathhouses. So, it's a reminder of a different time, and I think is a really interesting part of our history to somehow have labeled and put on signage along the trip. And of course, there's so much more that can be said about the Eli Whitney Museum, and we can really build on the institution that is there and the learning that is happening, and the dam, and so much. And in my mind, this would be the history of this place is a great beginning or end capstoning an industrial history walk from here down to Criscuolo Park, learning about all that's happened along the way. And as we are working on it and thinking, one of the other aspects I'd love to do is more environmental monitoring. We can see that people have, through the history, they felt separated. There's a lot of disconnection in the knowledge about what is actually happening in river. Is how healthy is it? How is it changing? How do the tides work? And so, as I had mentioned, there's this LoRa, or long range wireless network, that provides opportunities potentially to deploy sensors or other things that can provide real-time data that could be used by students or as some sort of public art, perhaps even feeding it to the underpass lighting project, so that there's some kind of feedback loop between what's happening in the river and what's happening in an artistic way to the community, but connecting people more to data. And this is a project called Field Kit from Conservify. The gentleman there was actually a Make Haven member locally and has now moved out to California. But I'd love to capitalize on those sorts of technologies to be able to feed data into our system and build awareness and connection to how the river's changing. I mentioned Make Haven, that's where I work. We now have a community biolab, and I would love to figure out how we can continue to do more intricate water testing and have a citizen science project around understanding the river using that asset. And just lastly, why is understanding the river so important and communicating it? It's because all the time we see folks out there in the river fishing, using the river, and that's culturally and may be important for food for these folks. But we also have to figure out how we communicate. There's from time to time been signage about how not fishing in the river. There's concerns about what's happening at English Station, whether there's really bad chemicals, so it's chemical contamination. There's also the overflow from the sewers and the stormwater, providing bacterial contamination. Educating people about where this is a risk communicating it not just as a sign that says don't, but as, how is this accumulating? Where are the problems happening? And communicating it in multiple languages. So how do we understand what actually are risks? What are the worst risks? And communicate that to folks so that we can both enable utilization of the river where it is low risk, but also discourage it where it may have consequences that people don't fully understand. And so with that, I have kind of gone through the things that I've been thinking about with the Mill River, the opportunities, the challenges. There are many more, and there's a lot to develop because we have such a intricate and long history with this river. But thank you for listening to this update. My thoughts, some not fully baked yet, but I hope will continue to evolve and develop and enhance our experience with our waterway. Thank you.